My mom called me a bad daughter for not paying her mortgage, but she just bought my sister a car. I used to think that once I got older, once I started making real money, things would get easier. That all the stress and struggle I grew up watching my mom go through would finally come to an end. That she'd finally get to relax, and we'd finally be okay. But the thing about money is, it's never just money. It's obligation. It's control. It's a leash, whether you're the one giving or receiving. And for as long as I can remember, I was always the one giving. I moved out when I was 20, but I never really got to be on my own. Even after I got my first apartment, my mom called me constantly, sometimes just to chat, but mostly because she needed something. The power bill was higher than expected. The fridge was empty. The mortgage was coming up, and she was just a little short this month. It was always something, and every time I helped, even when I was barely scraping by myself, even when I was surviving off ramen and dollar store groceries, I still found a way to send her money. Because she was my mom. Because I owed her. Because that's just what good daughters do. At least, that's what she told me. I spent 6 years, 6 entire years, doing everything I could to keep her afloat. I worked late nights, took on side gigs, skipped out on vacations, dinners, new clothes, anything that wasn't absolutely necessary, because I knew at any given moment she might call. And then, I lost my job. It was sudden. Absolutely unexpected. One day, I was going to work, replying to emails, thinking about what to make for dinner, and the next, I was in a meeting being told that the company was restructuring and that my position was no longer needed. I don't even remember what I said. Maybe I nodded. Maybe I thanked them for the opportunity like a good little employee. Maybe I just sat there, stunned, trying to process how my entire life had just shifted in a matter of minutes. I had savings, but not a lot. Enough to keep myself afloat for a few months if I was careful. But the moment I saw that severance package, I knew exactly what it meant. I couldn't cover the mortgage this month. It wasn't even my mortgage, but for the past 3 years, I'd been paying it like it was. Every month, like clockwork, I sent my mom whatever she needed. And now, for the first time ever, I couldn't. I knew I had to call her, tell her, explain. But I also knew how that conversation was going to go. I put it off for days, telling myself I'd do it tomorrow, then the next day, then the next. I kept applying to jobs, sending out resumes, hoping that maybe I'd get something fast enough that I wouldn't have to make the call at all. But nothing came. And when my mom finally called me, her voice sharp with impatience, I knew I couldn't avoid it anymore. "Why haven't you sent the money yet?" she asked, skipping right past the usual pleasantries. "You know I have deadlines for these things, right? I can't just wait around for you to remember." I clenched my jaw, trying to ignore the sting of her words. She hadn't even asked if I was okay. "I lost my job," I said, forcing the words out before I could change my mind. "I was laid off last week. I can't send the money this month. I just need a little time to figure things out." Silence. I could hear the TV in the background. A soap opera or a talk show. Something dramatic. Then a sigh. "So what am I supposed to do, huh?" I blinked. "What? What am I supposed to do? Just not pay my mortgage? You think the bank cares if you lost your job?" I felt something in my chest tighten. "Mom, This is so typical. I knew this was going to happen. I knew you'd let me down eventually. Let her down. Like it was a choice. Like I wanted to lose my job. Like I hadn't spent the past 6 years breaking my back to keep her comfortable while barely keeping my own head above water. "I just need a little time," I said again, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, great. Just great." She let out a bitter laugh. "You know, I worked my ass off for you. I sacrificed everything for you. And now, the one time I need you, you just..." "Mom," I cut in, suddenly exhausted. "I've been helping you for years. And I took care of you for years. Or did you just forget that? You think I wanted to be a single mother? You think I enjoyed struggling? Every dime I made went into raising you, feeding you, keeping a roof over your head." I stayed quiet. "I didn't ask to be a single mom," she continued, voice rising. "Your father walked out and left me with all the responsibility. I did my best. I sacrificed for you. And now, the one thing I ask, the one thing I need from you, you can't even do. Guilt." It hit me fast and hard, sinking deep into my bones like it always did when she talked like this. Because maybe she was right. Maybe she did deserve this help, and I did owe her. Maybe I was a bad daughter. I took a shaky breath, forcing myself to hold my ground. "I will help again. I just need time." "Unbelievable," she muttered. "Absolutely unbelievable. I felt my stomach twist. And just like that, she hung up. I sat there, my phone still pressed to my ear, my heart pounding. It wasn't even anger I felt. Not yet. Just exhaustion. Just the dull, aching realization that for the first time in my life, I needed her, and she wasn't there. The silence that followed that call wasn't just from her hanging up. It stretched into the next few days, into a week. She didn't call, didn't text, nothing. I should have been relieved. After all, I didn't have to hear her voice dripping with disappointment. Didn't have to sit through another lecture about how much I owed her. But it didn't feel like relief. It felt like punishment. I checked my phone constantly, expecting, hoping to see a message. Even something passive-aggressive would have been better than this radio silence. But she had cut me off like I was nothing. Like 6 years of supporting her meant nothing. And maybe, to her, it really didn't. I buried myself in job applications, telling myself I didn't have time to dwell on it. I couldn't afford to. My savings weren't going to last forever, and I had my own bills to worry about. Rent, utilities, groceries. A week passed, then another. Still nothing from her. And then, one day, I opened Instagram. My sister had posted a picture. A brand new car. OMG! My amazing mom just surprised me with my dream car. Best day ever. A sleek, shiny, brand new car sitting in their driveway. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting into a slow, sick knot. No, there was no way. I clicked on the image, zooming in, trying to convince myself I was misreading the situation. Maybe it was a rental. Maybe she was borrowing it. Another text. She paid cash for it. Can you believe that? My hands were shaking. Cash. She had called me a disappointment. Guilt tripped me into oblivion for not paying her mortgage. But she had thousands of dollars lying around for a luxury car for my sister. Growing up, Mia never really noticed the difference in how mom treated us. She wasn't malicious about it. She just didn't see it. She never saw the way mom leaned on me for money. She never knew how many times I covered bills, or how much I gave up just to keep things running smoothly. She didn't have to, because mom never needed her. She had me. But now that I wasn't useful anymore, now that I wasn't handing over my paycheck every month, she had moved on. I didn't even realize I had called mom until I heard the ringing in my ear. Then she picked up. Oh, so now you decide to call me? Her voice was sharp, defensive, like she had been waiting for this moment. I clenched my jaw. You bought Mia a car? A pause. Then, an impatient huff. So what if I did? I gripped my phone tighter. So what? So what? I had to sell my laptop just to afford rent, and you— I'm not having this conversation with you, she snapped. Mia deserves nice things. I let out a bitter laugh. And I don't. You had your chance. The words hit like a slap. I had my chance. Like I was disposable. Like I had served my purpose. And now that I wasn't useful, I was being cast aside. I felt something break inside me. A final, thin thread that had been holding everything together. Wow, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I always knew you favored her, but I didn't realize how little I meant to you. I gave you everything. I sent you money every month, even when I could barely afford my own rent. I put your needs before mine every single time, and the one time I asked for a little help, you act like I betrayed you. You think you're the only one who's ever struggled? She snapped. I had to raise 2 kids alone. I had to fight for everything we had. I didn't get to just sit back and cry about it. I had to figure it out. There it was again, the constant reminder that she had done so much for me, that I owed her, that nothing I did would ever be enough to make up for it. She would never see it the other way around. She would never see me. I didn't realize I was crying until I tasted salt on my lips. Her silence was louder than any insult she could have thrown at me. For the first time in my life, I didn't wait for her to hang up. I did it first. I sat in silence for a long time after hanging up. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something heavier, something that settled deep in my chest. I had spent my entire adult life bending over backward to make sure my mom was okay. I had given her everything I had, sacrificed opportunities, experiences, my own sense of security, because I thought that was what a good daughter did. And the moment I couldn't do it anymore, she tossed me aside like I was nothing. I had always known, on some level, that she favored Mia. That Mia could get away with things I never could. That the rules for her were different. But this was the first time I saw it so clearly. So blatantly. She had money. She just hadn't wanted to spend it on me. I wiped my face and took a deep breath, forcing myself to pull it together. I had things to do, jobs to apply for, bills to figure out. I couldn't afford to sit here and wallow in self-pity. But no matter how much I tried to shake it off, the feeling wouldn't go away. The next morning, Mia called. I almost didn't pick up, but a part of me, the part that still wanted to believe I had some family left, couldn't ignore it. "Hey," she said hesitantly when I answered. "You okay?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Not really." She was quiet for a moment. "I didn't know about the car." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I didn't ask for it," she said quickly. I thought she was joking when she said she was getting me one. Then she just showed up with it. She said it was my reward for being a good daughter. Mia must have realized what she said because she sucked in a sharp breath. "I didn't mean. I wasn't trying to." "It's fine," I said, even though it wasn't. Because that was the truth of it, wasn't it? In my mom's eyes, I wasn't a good daughter anymore. Mia hesitated. "I just don't get it." I thought she was struggling. "She always made it sound like you were the only thing keeping us afloat." I laughed again, bitter and exhausted. "Yeah, me too." Mia sighed. "I don't know why she does this. She's always been this way with you. It's not fair." It was the first time she had ever acknowledged it. I had spent my whole life thinking maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was just being sensitive or ungrateful or too eager to make myself the victim. But hearing Mia say it out loud, like it was something she had always known, something she just accepted, made my stomach turn. Mia was quiet for a long time before she finally said, "Are you really not going to talk to her again?" I hesitated. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her that I was done, that I was never going to let Mom use me like that again. But we both knew it wasn't that simple. She was still my mother, and no matter how much she hurt me, cutting her off completely felt like tearing out a piece of myself. "I don't know," I admitted. Mia sighed. "She's probably expecting you to apologize." The thought made my stomach churn. For what? For not helping her. I clenched my jaw. "I'm not doing that." "Good," Mia said firmly. "You shouldn't." That surprised me. For as long as I could remember, Mia had always been the peacekeeper. The one who smoothed things over, who told me to just let it go whenever Mom did something hurtful. But now she sounded different, like she had finally seen what I had been seeing my entire life. "I think I need some time," I said finally. Mia didn't argue. "Okay," she said softly. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I thought. After that conversation, I did everything I could to push my mother out of my mind. I poured all my energy into job hunting, waking up early every morning to send out applications, tweaking my resume, writing cover letters that started to blur together in my head. But no matter how much I tried to focus on moving forward, the anger kept creeping in. Every time I checked my bank account, every time I skipped over a cart filled with things I wanted but couldn't justify buying, every time I ate another cheap, thrown-together meal just to stretch my savings a little longer, I thought about the way my mother had lied to me and about the way she had tossed me aside without hesitation. And worst of all, I thought about how easily she had replaced me. I wasn't her daughter. I was her financial plan. And now that I couldn't pay up, she had moved on. I didn't realize how deep the resentment had settled until Mia invited me to dinner. I hesitated, but in the end, I agreed. Mia and I weren't particularly close growing up, probably because Mom never put us on equal footing. But now, for the first time in our lives, she actually saw me. And I wasn't ready to let go of that. I met her at a quiet little restaurant downtown. Nothing fancy, but nice enough that I felt self-conscious about my old jeans and the sweater I'd owned since college. I had been trying to cut unnecessary expenses, but looking at Mia, hair done, nails freshly painted, a cute little handbag sitting next to her plate, I felt like I was falling behind. We made small talk at first. Mia talked about work, I talked about my job search. But I could tell she was holding something back. I could see it in the way she kept fidgeting, in the way she chewed on her bottom lip like she was debating whether or not to speak. Finally, she sighed. "I saw Mom yesterday." I stiffened, but didn't say anything. Mia hesitated before continuing. "She asked about you." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Let me guess. She's still waiting for me to apologize." Mia's silence told me everything I needed to know. I shook my head, staring down at the table. "Of course she is. She's mad," Mia admitted carefully. "She thinks you're being dramatic. She said you're punishing her for not being able to afford to help you." My grip tightened on the menu. She could afford to help me. She just didn't want to. She didn't even ask if I was okay. My voice was quieter now. I lost my job, and all she cared about was her damn mortgage. Mia shifted uncomfortably. She didn't take it well? I let out a bitter laugh. Of course not. She said, "You've changed," Mia said. "That you used to be so responsible, so reliable, but now you're turning your back on family." Something in my chest twisted, because I knew exactly what she meant. To her, reliable meant useful. And now that I wasn't handing over my paycheck every month, I wasn't useful anymore. She's not going to change, is she? I said more to myself than to Mia. Mia shook her head. No. I exhaled slowly, gripping my glass just to give my hand something to do. I think I always knew that. I admitted. I didn't want to believe it. Mia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. For a long time, neither of us said anything. And maybe that was the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get from her. After dinner, I walked home instead of taking the bus. I needed the fresh air. The conversation with Mia replayed over and over in my head. The way she hesitated before talking about Mom. The way she told me so gently, like she was afraid I might break, that Mom thought I was the one turning my back on her. As if I hadn't spent years putting her first. As if I hadn't sacrificed my own security, my own financial stability, just to make sure she was okay. And now that I wasn't useful, she was rewriting history. That's what stung the most. Not just the betrayal, but the fact that she had never seen what I had done for her as love, only as obligation. I didn't sleep much that night. I tossed and turned, my mind racing through memories, times when Mom had guilt-tripped me, manipulated me, made me feel small for even thinking about putting myself first. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Mia. "Mia, hey, just wanted to warn you. Mom's been talking to Aunt Linda." My stomach dropped. Aunt Linda was Mom's older sister. And if Mom was the queen of emotional manipulation, Linda was her most loyal soldier. She had always been the one backing Mom up, the one shaking her head and tisk-ing whenever I pushed back even a little. I didn't even have time to respond before another text came in. "Mia, she's saying you abandoned her and left her struggling. That you're acting just like Dad." I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. That was her favorite insult. My dad left when I was 10, and I had spent my entire childhood hearing about what a selfish, irresponsible man he was. How he had abandoned his family. How he had forced her to pick up the pieces. And now, she was saying the same thing about me. Like I hadn't done everything in my power to keep her afloat, right up until the moment I physically couldn't anymore. I took a shaky breath and texted Mia back. "Me, are they trying to get the whole family to turn on me?" Her response was immediate. "Mia, I think so. I heard Grandma talking about how selfish you've been lately." I let my phone drop onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. Of course she was playing the victim. I shouldn't have been surprised. This was what she did. But still, it hit me like a punch to the gut. Because even after everything, even after seeing how she had discarded me without a second thought, some stupid part of me had still been hoping she would miss me. That maybe, once she realized I was serious, she'd reach out. That maybe she'd even apologize. But she wasn't going to do that. Instead, she was going to make sure I was the villain in this story. I wasn't just losing her. I was losing all of them. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. The call started the next day. First, it was Aunt Linda. I let it go to voicemail. Then Grandma. Ignored that one too. Then a few cousins who I hadn't spoken to in months suddenly decided they needed to check in on me. I didn't answer any of them. I already knew what they were going to say. "How could you do this to your mother? She raised you. She sacrificed for you. You know she's struggling, right?" I knew how this game worked. She wasn't going to come to me directly. She was going to let everyone else do the dirty work for her. Let them make me feel bad. Let them wear me down until I gave in. But this time, I wasn't going to. This time, I wasn't going to be guilted back into my place. I was halfway through a job application when Mia texted again. "Mia, Mom just called me. She's pissed you're not answering anyone." I rolled my eyes. "Me, I don't owe them a response." "Mia, I know. But she said she's cutting you off completely if you don't fix this." I stared at the message, then laughed, out loud, because that was hilarious. She was cutting me off? She had already done that the second I stopped being useful. I wasn't the one clinging to her. I wasn't the one calling around, gathering backup, trying to pressure her into changing her mind. She was trying to hurt me with this threat, But the truth was, I didn't feel hurt at all. I felt free, and I wasn't going back. It was funny how quickly things shifted once I stopped playing along. For years, I had lived my life trying to keep the peace, trying to avoid rocking the boat, trying to be the good daughter Mom expected me to be. But now I wasn't answering calls. I wasn't responding to guilt trips. I wasn't rushing in to fix her problems. And suddenly, I wasn't her daughter at all. The texts from family kept coming for another week. Some were concerned. Some were outright nasty. Some tried to guilt me into talking. But I ignored every single one. At first, it was hard. My fingers would hover over the screen, itching to type out a response to defend myself. But I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I wasn't going to argue my case like I was on trial. And the longer I stayed silent, the more obvious it became that none of them really cared about me. They cared about keeping Mom happy. They didn't want to hear my side of things. They just wanted me to fall back in line. But I wasn't going to. I refused. A few days later, Mia texted me again. "Mia, Mom's asking if I can convince you to talk to her." I exhaled slowly, pressing my fingers to my temple. "Me? She could just talk to me herself." "Mia, she says you blocked her out of your life." I let out a humorless laugh. "Me? That's Rich. She's the one who cut me off, remember?" "Mia, yeah. I don't think she expected you to actually accept it." That part made me pause, because Mia was right. Mom had expected me to come crawling back, to beg for forgiveness, to prove my loyalty by throwing myself at her feet. But I hadn't done that, and now she didn't know what to do. "Me, what does she want?" "Mia, she says she wants to clear the air." I frowned. That was different. I had expected her to double down, to keep playing the victim, to keep turning the family against me. I hadn't expected her to actually ask for a conversation, but still I didn't trust it. "Me, did she say what that means?" "Mia, not really. Just that she wants to talk things through." I hesitated. A month ago, I would have jumped at this. I would have told myself it was finally happening. She was finally realizing how unfair she had been, finally understanding how much she had hurt me. But I wasn't that naive anymore. I knew how these conversations went. It wouldn't be about clearing the air. It would be about winning. It would be about making sure she still held the power. And I wasn't interested in playing that game anymore. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, turning it over in my head. Did I want to talk to her? Was there any part of me that wanted to give her another chance? I wasn't sure. I had spent my whole life trying to be good enough for her, trying to prove my worth. And for what? So she could throw me away the second I stopped being useful? So she could replace me without a second thought? I wasn't going back to that. I had done my part. I had given her years of my life, years of my money, years of my effort. And I was done. For the first time, I wasn't going to be the one reaching out. If she wanted to talk, she could call me. If she wanted to fix things, she could make the effort. But I wasn't chasing after her anymore. Days passed, then a week, then two. I didn't reach out, and neither did she. Not directly, anyway. The calls and texts from extended family slowed down, but they didn't stop completely. Every few days, someone else would try their luck. An aunt, a cousin, even a family friend I barely spoke to anymore. The messages were all the same. "She's your mother. You know how she is. Just talk to her. You don't want to regret this someday." But regret what? Exactly? Regret not letting my mother drain me for the rest of my life? I was in the middle of yet another job application when my phone rang. This time, it wasn't an unknown number or a distant relative. It was her. I stared at the screen, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. It had been over a month since we last spoke. I wanted to ignore it, but deep down, a small, stubborn part of me still wanted to hear what she had to say. So at the last second, I answered, "Hello." For a few seconds, there was nothing, just the sound of her breathing on the other end. Then, "Oh, so you do still pick up the phone." I exhaled slowly, already regretting answering. "What do you want, Mom?" She clicked her tongue, like she was disappointed in me. "Is that how you speak to your mother?" I almost laughed. The audacity. The absolute audacity of her to pull the respect your elders card after everything. "What do you want?" I repeated. She sighed heavily, like this was so exhausting for her. "I wanted to check in on you." I clenched my jaw. "No, you didn't." "Excuse me? You didn't call to check in. If you actually cared how I was doing, you would have asked weeks ago." Silence. Then, a clip, defensive. "Mia said you've been struggling. There it was. This wasn't about me. This was about control. About making sure I wasn't doing too well without her, and I still needed her. I swallowed back a bitter laugh. Are you fine? Really? Her tone was sugary sweet, fake concern dripping from every word. Because I heard you still don't have a job. I stiffened. Not a real conversation. Not an apology. Just another way to remind me that in her eyes, I was failing. I gripped my phone tighter. I'll figure it out. She let out a dramatic sigh. Well, if you had just talked to me sooner, maybe I could have helped you. I nearly choked on my own disbelief. I actually pulled the phone away from my ear for a second, just to stare at it, as if that would somehow confirm that this was real. That she had actually just said that. That's funny, I said slowly, my voice shaking with barely contained anger. Because the one time I needed help, you told me I was a disappointment. Her voice was sharp now, irritated. Are you really still mad about that? Still mad? I was still mad about the fact that she had thrown me away like garbage? That she had money but had refused to help me when I needed her most? She scoffed. You're being ridiculous. I was stressed, and you blindsided me with that news. What was I supposed to do? I blindsided you? My voice rose. I lost my job, Mom. What? Was I supposed to send you a formal invitation before telling you? Oh, stop being dramatic. I exhaled sharply, gripping the bridge of my nose. Why did you call me, Mom? She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I knew she wasn't calling to check in. And sure enough, well, since you still don't have a job, I thought maybe you could start helping around here again. I froze. What? I mean, you have all this free time, she continued casually, like she hadn't just spent the last month smearing my name to anyone who would listen. You could at least help your mother with some errands. Maybe run some paperwork to the bank for me. Do some grocery shopping. Little things. My entire body went cold. I had thought, stupidly, that maybe, just maybe, she had called because she missed me, that maybe she felt something. But no, I had stopped giving her money, so now she wanted my labor instead. She didn't miss me. She missed what I could do for her. I took a slow, deep breath, and then, for the first time in my life, I told my mother no. No, I said simply. She scoffed. Excuse me? No, my voice was steady now, calmer than I felt. I'm not running your errands. I'm not helping you with paperwork. I'm not going to be your personal assistant just because I finally stopped being your personal bank. A silence between us. And then, in a voice dripping with pure venom, she said, You are just like your father. I smiled, not because it didn't hurt, but because, for the first time, I realized it wasn't an insult. Because my father? He had gotten out, and now so had I. Before she could say another word, before she could try one last time to guilt me back into my place. I hung up. It's been a few months now. I found a new job. Not just any job, but one that actually pays me what I'm worth. One that lets me afford my rent and groceries without having to choose between them. One that doesn't leave me lying awake at night, wondering how I'm going to survive the next month. I don't speak to my mother anymore. I stopped paying her mortgage, stopped answering her calls, stopped letting her drain me dry. And you know what? She's fine. Turns out, all those years of her acting like she couldn't survive without me? A lie. Because she always could have. She just didn't want to. Mia and I still talk, but not as much. She's still stuck in Mom's orbit, still trying to keep the peace, still walking that impossible tightrope. I don't blame her for it. I know how hard it is to break free. But I did. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel guilty about it.